Well, welcome, Kathryn Otoshi, and I'm so excited to speak with you today because you have so many awesome books. I mean, I really love the picture books that you're putting out for kids. They're so touching, they're so clever, they're so beautiful. So thank you for joining us today. And would you tell us a little bit about how you got into writing and what you've written?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I owe it to my mother who loved to read. And, sometimes when that passion from an adult or someone you respect and admire, they're passionate about something, it passes on. And she used to read a lot to me. My dad would too. But she would spend all her time in the library. And that's where I spent a lot of my afternoons was in the public library, opening up books and exploring.
Perfect. I love that. I'm always trying to get kids interested in reading, so that's awesome. And then how did you decide that you wanted to go into picture books specifically?
I love picture books for a whole bunch of different reasons, but because I like to draw, illustrate scenes, for example, it lend itself to me being able to tell a narrative, and explore and be fascinated with mythical worlds and draw maps and so forth, but also use what I also like to express myself in the form of illustrations. So that's how I think the marriage of picture book came to me was it's really a happy balance between both things of writing and illustrating.
Well, you're lucky you can do both. That's so awesome because nothing stands in your way. You can just, get it out there. And you have so many books out. Tell me about the ones that you've done both writing and illustrating versus illustrating.
I have a few different illustration styles. And so, for example, my number book series, 0, 1, and 2, those were all done kind of symbolically. So, the reason why I'm kind of attached to those books is instead of using, for example, for the main character, brown skin tones or gold skin tones or pink skin tones, I thought, hey, what if I had the main characters where they had different skin tones like blue or green? And then I thought I would take it kind of the extra mile of wiping out all facial expressions and then what it would be like if I just had, the main characters symbolic like blobs of color. Some of the other books I've done, like Lunch Every Day, and I've done books like What Emily Saw, Simon and the Sock Monster. Those are all more representational illustrations. But all the books that I do under my own company, KO Kids Books, are character building, have to do with maybe insecurities that we have even as adults, finding value in yourself and in others, standing up, courage, kindness, all things that we as humans maybe don't learn. We don't know when we're first born, but certainly as we grow, there are things that we learn as a society and also as a community of how we can grow and become the better person we hope to be.
Uh,
So,
and not only that, but you do it in such a way that's so clever and so touching and so beautiful. I loved it. I read 0 and 1 and Lunch Every Day. Excuse me. And just seeing how you wrap it all up in such a clever way and express it in a way I haven't heard before. I love it. So tell me about the awards you've won.
oh, okay. Well, one actually is the one that got the sort of the most accolades as far as physical, like a sticker being put on to your book. The couple that I am most proud of as far as an award was the Teacher's Choice Award. A lot of the books I do are for educators, and parents, teachers, and for students to be read aloud in schools. And the other one that I'm especially proud of is the E.B. White Read Aloud Award, which my books are meant to be read aloud. And as far as me as an introvert, I've always read to myself, but gosh, how enjoyable it is when an author will read to you out loud, or there's all these different communities and parents that come into schools that will read to kids, and I've always found that so valuable. So those are the two awards that I'm super proud of.
Awesome. And you do a lot of school visits. So how did you get into that? And how do you do that? I mean, because it's so expensive to travel and um, just everything that goes into it. There's so much more than just the actual moment that you're there in the classroom. So tell me a little bit about that.
That's a great question, Sid. I was completely terrified to do school visits, especially 5-year-olds scared me because you know that if you don't capture their attention, they're out of there. So I started off by not doing such great readings, but I did it pro bono. I would go to schools for free and I would read, and I started realizing it truly isn't about me. It's really about my audience. And when I started seeing the difference between pre-K and kindergartners versus second and third grade and fifth, sixth graders, and even beyond that, I would really cater my presentation for that audience. And I realized that kindergartners, it's fun to do movement with them and get them to stand up. Um, and at the same time, you can get them to stand up for something. So we say we stand up for each other, right? And then for the older kids, you could read faster. You can put more layers in there. They understand more complicated metaphors. But yeah, that's how I started off, was doing it just pro bono, with my highest goal level being I want to be able to read to your kids, because I felt like it was an important thing to have a conversation in person in front of your child. It was just a very different experience. And so I wanted to get over my introversion. How do you say it?
Yeah.
My introvertism. I just made up a word maybe. And get over myself. And that's how I started doing school visits. I felt like it was really important.
Awesome. I'm going to have to use that on my high school students that stand up and move around and stand up for each other. And I'm going to try it on them. So you start off pro bono doing school visits, and then you do a lot now, don't you? So like how do you decide which ones to do, and how do you get paid for that?
That's a great question. Well, I started getting better. And once I started understanding my audience more and realizing that you need to incorporate breaks sort of in your presentation, or sometimes movement, and also realize that for the older kids, you need to find a hook for them to start being a part of it. I started incorporating like maybe games and so forth. And because the presentations became more engaging, word kind of got around, and I was able to. What happens is that you get an author honorarium for your time, the travel that that time is valuable. So going over to the school, and then when you start doing more of them and you become more seasoned, you can start charging a more standard and professional rate. But I it came up to that point where I started doing enough of them where I was able to have a lot of things not go right, like as far as tech goes, but I could still keep going and feel comfortable talking. But you need to build up to that point, and so it was word of mouth.
And then you've sold so many books, so which I'm glad, because I want all the kids to read your books. But I'm wondering like what you did for marketing. And I know some of the books you had to do that by yourself, and then other books you had a traditional publisher. So tell me a little bit about the difference and how you approach it.
Okay, well, I started off quite a while ago not really knowing what it meant to self-publish, and even before social media was such a big thing, I was trying to get into it traditionally. So what I would do is I would go to conferences, like book conferences. Sometimes you'll see local book fairs, for example, or conferences, and I would talk to publishers about what they're doing. And I did find out that part of doing self-publishing the way I did it was going to independent bookstores, making the circuits there, doing readings at bookstores. I was doing free readings at libraries. And from the bookstores, the indie bookstores, since I'm an independent publisher, they're the ones that actually helped me kind of get into the chain bookstores like Barnes and Nobles. I did get an independent distributor, Publishers Group West, who they're over in Berkeley, and they're just wonderful, and they're the ones that helped me break out. But certainly doing a book by yourself is a tricky industry to get into, and I found out sort of one step at a time um, how to break in. But honestly, Sid, for the longest time, I did not quit my day job. I treated it as an expensive hobby. I was told by multiple people, don't expect to make, money off of it. And so after my fourth book, one got published through my company, KO Kids Books, it was really a shocker that it started doing well. And from there, I threw everything in the kitchen sink at it. And I, put ads out, print ads. I did promos, I gave away books. And I pushed so hard, it kind of reached a tipping point, and I think that's what got me to the other side of being able to sell a lot of the number books.
Nice, excellent. What a great plan. Yeah, I've talked to so many people who have tried all sorts of different methods, so it's always interesting to hear a successful approach. It's awesome. Um, so, what do traditional publishers get right? Since you've had both traditional and done self-publishing, what do the traditional publishers get right?
They do a lot right. So when I got Calling the Wind and Draw the Line published, um, they had me do free author visits, and at that point I was already getting honorariums for them. But they showed me how important it is to just right when the book comes out to do heavy promo, Get out there. So, you feel sort of like, oh, I just got this book out, but you got to have some reserve energy. And I used to be a part of the movie industry. So if you think of it akin to a movie being released, you know that, there's interviews, things going on TV, there's trailers, there's a lot of stuff going on the web to promote the book. So I also saw that even before it comes out, it's sort of like when you see teasers in the movie theaters or trailers, they're doing it months and months in advance. There's a lot of heavy planning, especially with the traditional publishers, to get everything aligned because you need to get reviewers. There's something called Junior Library Guild. If they like your book, that's a very wonderful way for the traditional book industry people to know about your book. They also showed me that when doing promo, yes, you have to give away your books for free. And sometimes at me as a self-publisher, I'm like, hey, wait a second, maybe I should charge at least something. But they've also shown me that, it's important to just get books in the hands of the right people. And I think that they do a lot of things right. And it was a really great experience to be able to see self-publishing versus the traditional way it's done.
Awesome. And likewise, what do self-publishing, that experience, self-publishers get right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting because as your own boss and self-publisher, my husband's the co-owner of KO Kids Books, but we've been able to do some very interesting kind of promos. We could also make decisions very quickly because something comes up and someone wants to license something, and because I own all the illustrations and the writing, I could literally say yes right away. So I did have a situation where AT&T wanted, one right away. They wanted a cover of a book that they felt suited this commercial, but they didn't have a lot of time. In fact, I think it was a 24-hour turnaround. And I don't know if, for example, that sort of approval process would have been able to been like within 15 minutes. When you're a big company, you have to get a lot of approvals. So things like deals with Barnes and Nobles, quick decisions could be made very fast. I could also yeah, I think it's just the ability to maneuver in a way where you don't need a lot of approval for stuff. Um, However, you can do out of the box kind of marketing as well. So I could promo something like, have kids come together and do a skit of one, and I don't have to get formal permission. I could do t-shirts, and more unusual cards, note cards, for a promo. So I'm talking about a lot of promotional things, but I think out of the box thinking is one of the things that I appreciate about being able to self-publish.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that, you're in control, you're pilot in command of your book. So that's awesome. But
It's a thing, and sometimes, if I'm not clear-headed as a pilot, who knows, right?
yeah, you got to know where you're going and how to get there. But I think that what I've often thought that traditional publishers might provide an advantage is if they give you a great marketing budget. So you're not alone in supporting the book.
Right. And what I did find out, I felt like both publishers, did a good job marketing. Initially with the launch of both Draw the Line and Calling the Wind, they were two separate publishers.
Which
One
one?
thing, so Calling the Wind was a Random House, Alfred Knopf book, and Draw the Line was Macmillan. So that was a Roaring Brook book through Macmillan. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I think what I have to say is it's really, after a certain point though, it's really the author that needs to take probably 70, 80%, maybe even more of the helm, because they have so many books that they're managing. They're always looking at their front list and what's coming up. And also, um, they have their authors too, the Hollywood stars, so to speak, of the children's book industry that, their name alone will carry the books. But the marketing budget will go to those books because they don't have an endless budget to go to everybody. So we have to also realize that when you're first coming into the industry, um, the big publishers um, have their limitations on what they can spend the budget on. And a lot of it's going to go to the top writers and illustrators. So a fit could be for a mid-sized publisher or even a smaller publisher. No matter what, I've discovered you really have to still do your own promo. one of the reasons that I really appreciated about the traditional publishing team is that you have an art director, you have an editor, you have a marketing team. So you have people constantly giving you feedback. And so, for example, with Draw the Line, with my wonderful editor, I didn't know exactly the story. In the beginning, Draw the Line had to do with one boy, kind of fighting with himself about his own boundaries. And in the end, it ended up being about um, two two opposites and how they come together. And at the time, it was a very um, very political at the time, and had to do with how do we come together as a conflict resolution when we feel so differently about something. But without the help of my editor and the art director, for example, I would not have had the book that I do. So Draw the Line came from that. And then one, for example, that was I was very picky about what I wanted for the paper. I knew I wanted it to be a blob of color, and I was so specific. I felt like I would have just been a big pain to be a part of a team. I wouldn't have been open to that, and that's when I realized, oh, I should self-publish. So part of it is you making the decision too. Is hey, can I be a team player? Is this a subject matter that I'm very open and would welcome feedback, or is it something that I'm so certain about, I'm so specific about? Maybe I should self-publish. And so those were decisions that I made when I had a new story coming out.
Well,
Traditional or self-published.
yeah, and also with your book one, it's very unique, and I'm sure that was the right decision because I can see how a publisher, traditional publisher, would want to change it, and it would have changed the feel of it completely. So it's very unique, and I think that's what makes it stand out so much as well.
Yeah, and you just reminded me too. I got feedback from somebody very important in the book industry that my cover was too plain, and it was a time when Rainbow Fish was out. There's a lot going on the cover with Rainbow Fish, which totally works for that book with the holograms and all the color, and that was popular at the time. But I really wanted it to be simple, and I had made a decision. I'm like, hey, even if it touches one kid, that's okay for me. And as a self-publisher, you make decisions like that. You can make decisions like, I have final say. In the traditional book market, you leave it up to them to make the final call, generally speaking. So yeah, it's just which way do you go, and then you think about your direction and going from there.
And then could you speak a little bit more about your experience in the film industry and how that laid the foundation for what you're doing now?
I can't tell you how much it actually laid the foundations for the books that I do now. So actually in my head, all the characters are moving on the page, and it's almost like I'm taking a shot of, one of those scenes, and have them, the best shot, and I take it there and I stick it in my book. But the way I see it is you cast a character in film, right? And you do the same thing in a picture book. So I decide if it's going to be a boy or girl, it's going to be a mouse, a robot, or, a square or a blob of color. They're all something that you have to think about as your main character. And then it defines the rest of the style of the book. I call it my mini movie, right? When you turn the page in a picture book, that's like a cut in a scene. So I always see the turning of a page as an opportunity to do a location change or a close-up of your character, or a far away shot or a drone shot. You're always looking at it in a different way. And even when you're framing, for example, a shot, that's like the director of photography. That's the DP saying, oh, this is, a scene about a kid feeling alone. So there, what I might do is have my character in the corner and have a lot of negative space around it, to really show the vastness of the isolation. Or if the character's feeling insecure, you might do a drone shot, always looking at different perspectives to be able to relay um, and portray too, how you want your readers to perceive the scene. So yes, film had a big impact on my children's picture books and the illustrations in it.
Well, that's perfect because there's such visual mediums in particular, picture books and film. They're just perfect examples of that because when you go into like middle grade, you don't have as many illustrations and you really are more into your head and you can go into the character's mind and a lot of things that you can't make visual.
Yeah. Another thing, the difference though between film and the book is that you give the reader the kind of the control of turning the page and so forth. Generally, if you're in a movie theater, it runs. But what I love about a book is, you go back and forth and you can make comparisons with, oh, did that show up over here? And, so you're giving all these clues as to what's coming. And you give the reader the control to go back and say, oh, it started here. But yeah, I love that. And yeah, and I love that about film too, where, you get to just relax and just be sit down and see the film and enjoy it as the everybody intended, the director, the writer.
For how rigid traditional publishers are, as far as like it has to be 32 pages for a picture book. Um,
Yeah, it is tricky, right? So part of the 32 pages and the 40 pages or the 48 pages has to do with signatures and how it's printed. But what happens too is it becomes a cost, and they have to put their cost hat on there and take a look at it. But generally speaking, books can be reduced to 32 pages or 40 pages. There needs to be a really valid reason. So for example, I'm sure, you've experienced this too. You see a movie and you're like, wow, that could have been cut 30 minutes, right? And so film, we don't see a 3-hour movie unless there's really a valid reason for it. So we're trying to be efficient with the time, and that's what they're doing to try to help us with, is to be efficient with the reader's time for the bracket and the age bracket of the audience. So I sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I could say all this other stuff, but maybe it's meant for another book. But I
sure.
think I think that even when I wanted, I had some books that I wanted to be longer. I realized that if I thought about it more, I could really boil it down to its core essence and say more with less. And that's what a picture book is really to me about. It's about poetry, the poetry of your words, the rhythm, how you say it, and in the least amount of words you can say it in.
For sure.
Also, what I'm thankful for with the book industry is I was very much of an introvert, and it helped me become more, at least, a kind of a temporary outward extrovert, because I had a very hard time going out there and promoting my book. And but I felt like the themes and the messages for the kids were very important to be addressed and introduced in schools. Like, for example, anti-bullying and people who had, we all have insecurities, but especially for kids who um, or have fears. And so I reached out to my higher level self and I said, you if you want your books to go out there, you have to be able to be willing to articulate and speak about them. So um, if it wasn't for the children's book industry, I would not be able to even be here now. So
Nice.
I'm thankful. I'm very grateful
Love that.
for the book industry for helping me with that.
So are you a part of any writing communities and do they help?
Hugely. I'm part of the Temecula Valley Writers and Illustrators group. It's a relatively new group, but they went from 4 people getting together at a coffee shop to over 150 members in a year. So they've been really amazing. They just had John Mayberry come. He's a New York Times bestseller. Um, and they've introduced me to wonderful people like yourself, Sid Blue. You are incredible. You do wonderful books and have wonderful messages in your books. Stacia Deutsch, she's along with Felicia, they've really just spearheaded this whole thing. And what it's really helped as a community is they're open. They're sort of like, hey, let's do like a spoken word thing. Hey, let's see if we could add a poetry segment, or maybe we can talk about doing screenwriting. And they're very open, but it's just a way for us to communicate with other like-minded authors and illustrators, other creatives on, especially if we feel like we're stuck. I can ask you, Sid, for example, how do you get over it? What do you do? And what's your schedule like? How do you garner that time to that sacred time to write and be creative? And especially there was a whole session just on that about really having precious time, really trying to protect it. That happened I think it was even a couple months ago. There's also the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is really wonderful. They have local conferences as well as big annual conferences in California. And there's also the Highlights Foundation over in Pennsylvania. Really wonderful. They do smaller workshops that talk about different techniques for illustration, for example, or just going on retreats in a beautiful setting for writing. So many, many options, but I cannot emphasize enough how valuable it is to meet other writers and illustrators in this field. Because as I could say, it can be very um, isolating doing what we do, but when you open up those doors, suddenly you realize there's a lot of people who are like-minded like you and are willing to share, which is so wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to have a community of people who understand what you're going through. Tell me a little bit about Beautiful Hands because that's such a clever, again, and beautiful book. The way you do the illustrations and what it means. Just show us that one.
Okay, so Beautiful Hands actually was done for a friend of mine who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and his name's Brett. And one of the things is when I go and speak about the book one, is I say, let's try to do one kind thing for somebody else every day. So I have kids make a commitment. And then with this situation, I really wanted to lift his spirits. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I thought if I could lift up his spirits emotionally, that would have a positive impact. And so Beautiful Hands was done based on his question to his children, what will your beautiful hands do today? He would literally hold their hands in his and ask that question. And so I wanted Noah, his older son, and Sophie to be in the book too. So I had them make handprints for the book because I wanted to incorporate them in the illustrations. So whenever I do illustrations, things change because, like, for example, if I do a book about homelessness, I might use collage. If I do a book about grief, I might use watercolor because it reminds me of tears. So Beautiful Hands was based on his question, what will your beautiful hands do today? So what happened was, with the question, will you plant ideas? Will you touch? For example, that's physical, but the emotional part is, will you touch hearts?
Oh,
Will
stop there. I love that one.
The other one is, will you lift? So you could lift a heavy box for somebody, but you could lift someone's spirits. And what happened was the book starts off small with a small gesture physically, and then it goes to the higher level vision, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. So I use more and more handprints. And what happened is more people wanted to join in to make a handprint in this book as a commitment to kindness, and also to the idea of what will your beautiful hands do today. And in the end, it asks, will you reach for love or peace, truth, faith, hope, and dreams? So the question became, what will your beautiful hands do? And the last page is tomorrow. So Sid, this page is kind of special because over 100 people gave their handprints. And Brett had told me, gosh, my dream is to get this book into every bookstore across America. And I'm like, how are we going to do that? And so we did a fundraiser where we had people, friends, family come over to his house for a party. And we said people could donate $5, $10, but pie in the sky, let's say for $100 as a donation, you would get a book, you would get a poster, but you would get your handprint in this rainbow forever. And that day, over 100 people gave $100, and we raised $10,000 in a day. And we made Brett's dream come true and got this book everywhere. And so, as I was mentioning earlier, all my illustrations change according to the meaning of the story, but this one was a special one.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we're just about out of time, and I just wanted to thank you so much for spending some time with us here today and letting us know just like your journey of how you created this amazing impact. I mean, you've sold like millions of books.
Well, I wish it were millions, but I've sold definitely with one title one. I could say that was 500,000 with that one. Um, each book has its own journey, but I've learned something from each and every title. So ups and downs and challenges, and they're almost like kids to me.
Yeah, they are. But I also like that your point of view that you are getting something from this journey of being a writer, and it's making you less introverted, and how that's like your journey, and it's not just all about the writing or all about illustrating or all about selling books. It's just
It's not even all about publishing.
yeah,
It's really about being consistent, but also what I've learned through especially doing school visits is what I did not expect, honestly, Sid, was this, how much value the students have given back to me, to see them taking the messages from the books and then taking them into their own lives, and then sharing back with me their stories of overcoming a tough situation at school, or feeling isolated, or them, breaking out of their shell and reaching out to maybe somebody else who needed help at school. That was something that I was not expecting. So books really go even beyond the book, right, into our own personal narratives, which is something I love.
I love that. We'll end with Beyond the Book.
Book.
Well, again, thank you so
Much.
much.
I can't thank you enough. Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye bye.